Each of the panelists are going to give a brief introduction of themselves and what their role was in this entire event of the escape and since. I will just on a personal note add, if anybody in this audience does not know who retired Sergeant Jay Cook is, you shouldn't be here. But please join us, ask some questions, and let's get started. We'll start with Chris.
My name is Chris Malloy. I was a correctional sergeant at Clinton Correctional Facility. At the time of the escape, I was the outside sergeant. When this whole thing manifested itself, I was the industry sergeant, which is where the seamstresses and the tailors all worked. During the escape, I was assigned as the liaison between the Department of Corrections and New York State Police. So I was in and out of the command center quite often. The first week of the escape, I helped with the clearing of the village of Dannemora, and then after that I got assigned to the command post.
Michael McKinnon. I was the senior range officer at Clinton Correctional Facility, also the senior range instructor for the Clinton Correctional CERT team, which I served on during the escape. My basic role was training for the staff in various aspects in regards to escapes and other issues that happen in the facility and the general training of the staff.
I'm Tammy Sawchuk. I'm the Executive Vice President for the New York State Corrections Officers PBA. At the time of the escape, I had been newly elected for 11 months. My role was behind the scenes, working to meet the members' needs that were out in the field and inside the correctional facilities.
My name is Chuck Kess. I'm a retired major with the New York State Police. At the time of the escape, I was a troop commander of Troop B, which is the 5 surrounding counties here in the North Country, and I became the incident commander for 23 days of approximately a 1,600-member law enforcement task force.
My name is Richie Elson. I am director and producer of the film you just watched, We Stand Corrected, Dannemora. I am the only one on this panel who did not live these events firsthand. But I had the privilege of meeting all these fine people, along with all the ones you saw in the film, and many others who were not in the film. I'm originally from the North Country, and it's an honor to have the premiere here tonight.
Jay Cook, retired New York State Police Sergeant, currently working for the Franklin County Sheriff Department part-time at Chateauguay Central School as a school resource officer.
We have somebody who wants to come up and start the questioning? Or? Don't be shy. That's what you're here for.
Okay, thank you.
I knew he'd be the first to leave.
Hi there. Richie, that was a very good documentary. Thank you. My name is Rick Mahuta. I worked at Clinton for 31 years as a correction officer. I worked in Upper H. I was part of Special Ops in Clinton as a crisis intervention officer. Dave, my best buddy over here, Richie's father, we worked together in Upper H block for, I don't know, 15 years maybe? Yeah. Anyway, part of my voluntary assignments that I took upon myself, I knew, like I said, I was there for a long time. Chris and Mike, I don't know the rest of you, but anyway, I patrol those catwalks at least once a month. Before I retired, I went out to the garage for the last 5 years of my service. But I have a question about the runnings of the facility that I'm not quite sure of. Like, say, my question would be towards Mike or to Chris. Okay, my first question is, when did they remove those gates in the basement? Do you have any idea? Were the grill gates between the basements, were they never there? Because there were gates, I thought, in the basements when I first started. Now this might not have anything to do with anything, but Do you remember those? The gates in the basement from A block to the B block, A block corridor? Were there ever any gates there?
I can't answer that, but I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
There was a lot of rumor and innuendo that the department with OGS had the gates removed. I don't actually remember gates being there. I know some of the old timers talked that in the old days there were wooden doors literally at the base of the cell blocks, but I don't recall them ever being there during my time there, and I was part of the tunnel inspection teams that did the tunnels.
Okay. Yeah, this might not have anything with the way the community went, but this was the operation of the facility. They shut the steam off in April or May of 2015 for the escape. Who cut the hole in the pipe, in the steam pipe going out? This is the great, this is the great. Who cut the hole inside the facility that is cut so perfectly square and supposedly with a hacksaw? This is top secret information that has never been revealed. And I was just wondering who cut the hole.
We're wondering that too.
Does somebody know? I didn't hear that.
The thing is with that hole, folks, and I'm going to be honest, all of us up here, if we knew that answer, we probably would have said it long before now. We have ideas, we have thoughts, but none of it is concrete. And it's not really fair to put that out to anyone, and accuse or blame anyone without real knowledge. That's not fair to them. So to sit here and put suppositions together and try to say, we think it was this, that's not really fair. Do I agree that those holes don't look like they were cut by hacksaws? I'd have to agree with you.
Well,
If I could add something to that from the state police and the investigative side of that, from the onset, it looked fairly clear cut to us that they were using power tools. And again, and I said so in the film, just from a standpoint of a layman's term, our speculation, the neatness of those cuts, the fact that they were going through 3/8 or greater steel. However, and we operated under that premise for a while. So what did we do as a result of that? We went and interviewed and inventoried, along with our colleagues in corrections, every entity of the many dozens of projects going on inside Clinton at the time. We interviewed all of the project coordinators. We interviewed the people that were conducting the work, that being civilian vendors and tradesmen that were coming in from the outside. We, along with our colleagues, inventoried their equipment, their job boxes to account for all tools, particularly power tools. We were very deliberate in that function. Until the point where we could not identify any source of these tools, anyone who may have preempted the escape, rather contributed to the escape by getting in and making these cuts on behalf of the inmates, or leaving them tools or the facilities to do so. And then we had to acknowledge and investigate the second plausible scenario here, that they, in fact, were using hand tools to do so, as incredulous as that seems. And we had some direct physical evidence of that, that being hacksaw blades that were, as you could probably see in one of the pictures during the documentary, that were wrapped and rubber banded to create, field expedient handles. And we did pipe cutting tests ourselves, and we contacted the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, had their tool mark experts come up and look at these cuts to determine, were they done with high-speed power equipment, or could they have been done with hand tools such as these broken hacksaw blades. And the final analysis in the investigation was, and this is corroborated by the FBI experts that assisted in this, is that they could have in fact been done with these hand tools, these broken hacksaw blades, as implausible as that seemed at first blush. So I can tell you, having been the troop commander involved with the investigation, and I'm aware of, and I understand why people would doubt that outcome, but I have, and I'm retired now, and so I could speak to this, I have no reason to discount the official finding of the investigation. And it's not just because David Sweat says that's how he did it. That's because our investigators and FBI counterparts said, yeah, it's plausible. It could have and likely was conducted in this manner by hand. And again, we have no evidence to refute that, even though we started off on the premise looking for the use of power tools in this escape.
Thank you.
Going back to what my former partner, Mahuda, brought up about the missing gates. I was told by a source that OSHA came into the facility while Paul Knapp was the Dep of Administration and did an inspection and found that the doors or gates in question in the tunnels opened the wrong way, so that if you were in the tunnel, they should have opened out instead of opening in. And OSHA ordered the department to change the gates, switch the hinges, move the frame. And for budget reasons, Albany chose not to do it. They just removed them. Now, in Greenhaven, when I worked there from 77 to 88, we had a similar situation. They had steel doors at the bottom of the catwalks, one at the front of the company that led to the electrical room, and one at the rear of the catwalk in the lower level that led around to the other block, A block. And what happened is the water that was down in the bottom of the catwalk had swelled the steel frame, and the door wouldn't close anymore. So we kept writing it up, and Albany said, we're not going to give the money to do it. And it wasn't until inmate plumbers were coming in through A block, going down into the lower catwalk, coming around into the catwalk in B block, and hung 2 green packing bags with plastic liners, made homemade hooch, and had a rubber hose going to the back of the cell, and had the big mustard pump, and had booze on tap, that they suddenly decided it was time to secure those doors. So it isn't the first time, and it isn't the first facility where budgets, money, Albany decides it comes first. So Paul Knapp, and we tried to interview him, and we couldn't make contact, but it was done on his, well, he was the Deputy of Administration. As to a particular date and year, I don't know the answer to that, but it's something that should have been looked into. Because very quickly after the IG did their inspection and had the report, because when Richard and I took a tour of the facility 2 years ago, I was shown that, yes, now we have steel gates on all the doors. It should have been done.
Hey, I'm John Duper. I live in Peru, and my question is for Jay. Fantastic documentary, by the way. Thank you very much. It was really, really honestly, it was gripping listening to you describe the moment that you drove up and saw this gentleman. And when you described him pulling his hood down and showing you his face, at that very moment, did you know who it was? At that second, did you realize who you were dealing with?
When he pulled the hood down and showed me his face, just like this, that is when it clicked.
You knew who it was.
Absolutely.
Well, I know you will say that you were just doing your job, but most people's jobs don't entail deciding whether or not they need to shoot another person. So I just want to thank you very much for doing that. Great job.
Can I just add one thing, because you're not going to hear it from Jay Cook, that's for sure. And in my 26 years in the state police and 6 years in the military, I've never met, known, or seen anyone as prepared as Jay Cook was for that moment in his life, in his career. And I thank God every day because it brought this thing to an end, these 23 days to an end for all of us, safely. For Jay Cook and his talent, his ability, his perseverance, his situational awareness. He was a supervisor that day, and he had a number of people working for him. But I'll be honest with you, like any supervisor, he could have easily been back in the office on a rainy day, checking his email, filing a report, you name it. But he was out there doing his due diligence, not only supervising his people, but patrolling individually on his own. And it was due to his tactical acumen and his knowledge of the area, and the fact that he'd been dialed into this thing for 23 days like the rest of us, that he instantaneously recognized David Sweat and took the appropriate action. And in case you're wondering what it would have taken to do what he did, a foot pursuit for over 100 yards over the length of a football field, and he gave Sweat arguably every opportunity to surrender, to stop, plant his feet, and take 2 shots at a moving target, which was closely approaching the far wood line, and theoretically freed him, because he could have escaped had he got into that wood line and separated himself from Sergeant Cook at the time. Take those 2 shots from a distance well in excess of 50 yards, and to hit him with both of those shots, and then literally get on the radio and call for EMS and save his life, is nothing short of remarkable in my opinion. So, you know, like I said, he's never going to tell you that, but I got to say that.
Others are going to come forward and ask questions, and in the interim, I'm going to thank you, Chuck, for making that statement. And I will just say that in my 10 years in the Assembly, the 2 proudest days I had was one week I had the opportunity to recognize the CERT teams from Clinton and our North Country, but from across the state, for the amazing job that every single one of those correction officers did under, as Chuck said in the documentary, under the worst possible weather and conditions that anybody could have ever been asked to work under. And then the following week, I was given the opportunity again by my colleagues to recognize Major Chuck Guess for his seniority and his ability to oversee 1,600 law enforcement people. And I said that day on this floor of the Assembly, the most humble and most quiet person I have ever seen who portrayed the epitome of a professional Jay Cook. So you folks were right in giving these guys a standing ovation, and thank you for that. And now we have a question.
My question is going back to the steam pipe and the piece that was cut out. They said they never located that, and that was like 3/8" steel. It looked like a pretty good sized piece.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from. You know, and I've got the producer sitting right here next to me. I'm not sure where that came from because, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know with the investigation, we're not missing any pieces of steel.
Oh, okay.
I will say that is actually, I was misinformed at the time of the making of it. Apparently, I did hear that those pieces were given to the state police for investigation to see the way they were cut. To my knowledge, there were never any pictures released of them later on or any actual detailed indications of what were found. But as Major Guest said, there were findings that were possible that they could have been cut by the hacksaw blades.
Did they actually do any tests and manually try to reproduce it? You know, cut through steel like that and see how long it would take? And
Yes. Yep. And it could be done.
And it could be done.
It could be done.
Okay.
And it could be done laying on your side in that 18 to 20 inch steam pipe, as was described by inmate Sweat upon his capture. That could be done as well. So, you know, bearing in mind that these at least Sweat these guys were out of their cells up to 85 nights, you know, as reported by the inmate. They did have the time and the rest of their lives, basically, to create the conditions for this escape, and as aided by Mitchell, and probably the motivation to do so. So while you and I wouldn't spend, you know, 3 weeks laying on our right side trying to cut a hole out of a steam pipe outside under the walls, if you got the rest of your life to do it, I guess it can be done. I mean, evidently it can be done.
Yeah, thank you.
My wife is a retired CO, and we live in Saranac, and every year we saw the drills, the escape drills, where they had the roadblocks set up. And it seems to me that the entire focus was that triangle from Dannemora both ways to Route 3, Katyville, and in between them. Has the policy changed? Because obviously those guys hit the tracks and booked. Once they found the railroad tracks, they were gone. Does anybody know if DOCS is, whatever their new name is, community supervision, anyway, we won't go there. If they've changed their policy to expand and get out a little bit farther than they could see?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would, you know, encourage you guys to jump in at any point. I can tell you from the state police
Go for it, Chris.
perspective that the Red Book plan that we're all talking about up here, and not just at Clinton, but in every facility in the state police has to sit down once a year with their partners in corrections and go over the plan, face to face, troop commander to superintendent and the immediate staff, and then they drill it. You know, they practice it as you're referring to. So while it's a good guide, and it was even in 2015 to a degree, while it's a good guide and it gives people a place to start, you know, and start initially responding, it's nothing more than an initial plan. And like any plan, you have to be flexible, and you have to go quickly
contact
beyond it. So I can tell you, I worked as the troop commander for another year beyond the Clinton escape, well after the IG's report. And what I can say is the next subsequent meeting after the escape, a year later, we addressed with the staff at Clinton a number of changes that would occur in that particular plan. And I know by talking to my fellow colleagues within the state police, they were changing other aspects of other plans and other facilities throughout the state as a result of that. So, you know, we're public servants, and you are expected to have learned your lesson, you know, for the safety and welfare and benefit of the citizens that you serve. So I know that to a degree that has been done. I don't know to everybody's satisfaction if that has occurred yet, but it's probably a moving target, and I'd like to think that they continue to make improvements as they go. And again, these fellas and Tammy would know firsthand if they're satisfied with some of the changes that have been made as a result of that.
Okay. By department directive, there has to be a yearly escape pursuit drill. So the facility has predetermined posts that are set up. You know, whoever can get there first. You know, I mean, we have to set up a temporary post where we issue shotguns and traffic cones and signs and that type of thing. And then once we get staffing in, then we'll put CERT personnel on those roadblocks. So it's, you know, that initial perimeter is predetermined.
Yeah.
You know, so and then it goes from there. Obviously, sightings or whatever. But
Yeah, but people that aren't really involved in corrections, like, you know, I was on the south side of it there with my wife being a CO.
Yep.
They don't know how that is set up, you know. But I comment, once the CERT teams from the other area came in and and the troopers, by all means, the troopers from the other zones came in and led our troopers back to the area that they knew. Bingo, right there, man on the end. You know, area they knew what they were doing. All the troopers that came in and the CERT that took over, I believe a lot of the roadblocks too, were very admirable in their demeanor toward the pop. You know, they see some of us go through 3 or 4 times a day. You know, they recognize us. You know, that car been through here twice. You know, well, in their normal course of business. And as many times as I went through them, I never heard a harsh word from any of them. they did a fantastic job, and I'll tell you what, we're glad to have them. So,
Well, thank you, sir, I appreciate that.
thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Clearly, in my view, as the incident commander, it was very much a team effort. We had 16 or 17 agencies from around the country working on this, on the ground in the North Country. And you're very accurate. We had troopers come in from Long Island, from Buffalo, and that was the same to be said. Every corner of the state had correction officers cycling through here to relieve their colleagues. That with the, I think the added plus, like they always talk about the 12th man on a football team, the added plus of having this kind of community support that we enjoyed in the North Country from day one, and the quiet confidence that they, and the media, Press Republican as an example, that the media and the community expressed and how they supported all of us, that enabled us to do this job. Remember, it wasn't a trooper or even a correction officer that broke this case wide open. What was it? It was reports by members of the community. It's one instance, an off-duty correction officer, but it was people out there checking their camps, cabins, trail cams, and calling us with what they thought was either the biggest or the smallest thing out of place that turned this entire incident around for us after 2 weeks, where by day 3, the pundits in the media were saying the state police, Department of Corrections, they're all wasting their time. They're spending money and they're wasting their time because these guys are long gone. They're in Canada, they're in Mexico by now. They should hang it up and let U.S. Marshals or somebody start looking for them. Well, the reality was they hunkered down in the community because of the pressure applied by our colleagues and this team that we were able to assemble. And then it was the community tips that broke it wide open 2 weeks in, who, was frankly the turning point. And it was, and I can tell you, because I walked that command post every day and talked to individuals on all sides in all agencies, there were people who were flat out surprised that they were still here. And I have to give credit, from the top down, and I don't mean me, I mean people above me, that allowed us to keep that kind of work ethic and that presence of manpower up here that kept them kind of hemmed in and allowed us to go forth based on the community's input, get the DNA results within 24 hours as we did by folks in the lab, and confirm that the 2 of them were still here. So it was very much a community effort. I question whether that could have been successful in other corners of the state of New York.
I have a couple questions. One, obviously there was a lot of focus about what was going on outside, but what about in the prison? What was the atmosphere like in Clinton community or Clinton prison when all of this was going on? What was the attitude of the prisoners, and did it fire them up, or was it relatively calm inside the walls?
Well, I think initially the inmates thought it was a great big joke. They thought it was hoorah until they were all locked in every day and fed styrofoam trays. It wasn't so much hoorah. So, it was bad for them. They weren't getting out for rec. They weren't getting their commissary buys. So it wasn't easy on them either.
But not riled up and causing more problems themselves for inside, for the COs that were on duty.
Initially, the prison was on lockdown status, so there couldn't have been any bad behavior, let's say, for the initial lockdown. There was really nothing of any major incident that was reported. But I can say this, once a correction officer came forward and became the target of an investigation, I can say that the officers and staff inside the prison, morale was down. I mean, it was a hit that they took, but they were out there every day doing their best. Not only the CERT teams from around the state, but the personnel themselves. They worked tirelessly. And in the beginning, a lot of them without food, water, breaks, bathroom breaks, working 16, 18, 20, some 24 hours in conditions that the North Country never saw before. And I can say for myself, not only wearing a uniform, but being the executive vice president, I couldn't be more proud of what they did.
My next thing I think is I'm concerned about the number of suicides that we're hearing more about from COs, from New York State Police. From what little research I've done, the new laws affect as of January 1st, along with this firing me up as well. The lack of thought process that goes in Albany, it just, I'm not sure if anybody has the answer here, but it seems like the steps that had been taken and continue to be taken put not only our law enforcement and our CO in danger, but also the public as well. So thank you all for your service and what you do for us every day, and for firing me up even more. So thank you very much.
My question is to Sergeant Cook. When David Sweat, when you recovered the backpack and the items that he had, did he have maps in the backpack? Did he have a compass? Flashlights? Because when we were making the documentary, and I accompanied my son and the camera crew in an SUV driving through the snowmobile trail, or whatever you would like to call it, at night, heading towards Owl's Head. Somebody they would have had to have, I would think, a compass or something to know the direction that they were traveling, because it was hard to see in a car at night with headlights. I can't imagine what it was with two people walking there in the woods, not being able to see those puddles that have holes that half the car sinks into. Did he have compass, maps?
So after he dumped the backpack and my part was all over with there, they got me out of there rather quickly. So I didn't actually search the backpack. I can tell you he had a compass on his chest, a little bubble compass. He had an empty knife case on his hip, and I found out later that he either dropped it running or deliberately threw it while he was running from me, so he could say he was not armed. One or the other, I don't know which. And they found a knife the next day in our travels.
Were those items things that they acquired in the hunting cabins that they
That's
may
what
have
we
stayed in?
believe, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I saw photos of what was in his backpack. He had Pop-Tarts, he had candy, he had water bottles, a couple little clothing items, I think, and he did have a map. So
One other question with that is that I believe that I had read that they had accumulated a large quantity of pepper, and that have an effect on the canines tracking them.
I'll let Major Guess answer that one.
Yeah, no, they did accumulate large quantities of pepper. They did liberally try to apply it. Typically, whenever they changed direction or they holed up someplace for any period of time, they doused that area with pepper as they moved out. And we know that because on occasion, and this was a clue in and of itself, we found these pepper packets scattered on the ground along with some candy wrappers that they inadvertently left behind. Does it have an effect on the dogs? No, not really. You would need way more pepper than one or two individuals could carry, to have an effect on a trained working dog, police dog. Their ability to resupply themselves is an important aspect of this entire case. When they left the facility, they brought certain things with them. Some of the commissary things that they had purchased and kind of stocked up, if you will, that they were able to drag out the pipe and through the manhole with. But as they went, they were smart enough and wily enough to get into these camps and cabins in the wilderness in the backcountry. And wherever they went, They would stay for a night or two, and they would avail themselves of certain items that they would, take into their possession and make their living in the field a little more comfortable, a little more fruitful. For example, the compass, the map. They also helped themselves to any alcohol at any time that they could find in these structures. And they acquired that shotgun that Richard Matt was utilizing when he tried to commandeer a vehicle on day 21. They found the shotgun in that one cabin where they showed that the correction officer, who was off duty at the time with his ATV and his dog, challenged him. They found the shotgun at that location, and they found ammunition at a different location, which I think is actually fortunate for the correction officer. Had they had the shotgun and the ammunition at that location initially, it could have been a different outcome.
One more question for you, Major. Do you believe that they did most of their traveling during the day or at night?
I believe they did most of their traveling. It was a mix. Obviously, on day one, they escaped at midnight, so they had to travel and get as far away from that facility as possible. Remember that Plan A was Joyce Mitchell picking them up at that manhole at Bouck and Barker Street at midnight on the night of the escape. There was no Plan B. She was supposed to bring them some limited camping supplies. She was supposed to bring them a weapon, a shotgun, tenting, maps, compass, and they were going to go in her personal vehicle and try to get as far out of the area as they could. Some indication from interviews where they were going to try to get to West Virginia, because it seemed like a logical stopping over point, place where they could hold up for a little while and then continue south to the Mexican border, ultimately crossing the border. Since that didn't occur and there was no Plan B, they knew that they had to get out of there, and that they were a target, if you will, if anybody within the village of Dannemora, which is a fairly well-lit area in the summertime, overhead street lights, etc. And they moved west. They paralleled 374, if you're familiar with the lay of the land up there, staying off of 374 initially, paralleled it by some of the village streets. When they ran out of village real estate, they got up on 374, walked for a short period of time on 374, avoiding traffic, and then made a sharp left-hand turn on Huron Road to get off of 374, started heading south, knowing that they were going to get west into the wilderness as deep and as fast as possible before anybody noticed that they were missing or any responding plan could be put into effect, with roadblocks and searchers and helicopters, etc. And they made some fairly decent progress on day one. After that, with the type of presence that was out there, yes, we tried to form a very hard perimeter around the village of Dannemora, but at the same, and that was alluded to by one of the guests here, but we also had helicopters and canines, rangers on ATVs, special operations, tactical people with both CERT, state police, other agencies, trying to push out on the rail trails, the power lines, what we considered at the time to be high-speed avenues of egress. Again, having to hold home plate, if you will, in Dannemora and search every structure that we could, because it was my greatest fear that we would give up Dannemora too quickly and move out, and then find that they had broken into a house, taken some family or some elderly person hostage, killed them, waited us out, taken their car and driven from the area. So we had to prosecute both a clear search of the village, which took days, and at the same time push people out as more reinforcements came in to get out to the backcountry. A lot of our forest rangers, who, like the corrections guys, are kind of unsung heroes in this. They had their expert sign and tracking personnel out there looking for any sign, any track, like you would track an animal or a human in a manhunt, to see where these guys went. Our investigators, on the other hand, were looking for any evidence, bank transfers, any connection with associates by phone or text message who might help them, or stolen vehicles, anything to lead us to believe that they had left the area. And for 2 weeks, we kept the forces largely intact because we had no direct evidence they had left the area. And thank goodness we did, because it turns out that they stuck long enough. But they traveled both day and night. They tried to stay off these trails and roadways. They would parallel the road, if you know what I mean. They'd be into the wood line 10 yards or so, and they'd walk along a road kind of as a handrail to help with their navigation. And they headed west away from the prison, knowing all the while, remember, they did come across a map fairly quickly, knowing that they're about 25 or 30 miles south of the Canadian border, and that ultimately, if they wanted to head north, once they think that they penetrated our search zone, that perhaps they could get to freedom in Canada. I think the Mexico thing was out as soon as Joyce Mitchell didn't pick them up, and the next effort was to put as much distance between themselves and the prison, and then eventually try to get north to Canada.
Thank you.
I was in the purchasing department during this time, so I kind of know some of the background, but where did that monetary figure come from? On how much it cost? The whole entire 23 days between the cert and, you know, providing for the prisoners the things that they couldn't get on lockdown. Do you know where that 23 million came from?
Oh, where the money came from?
Like where that figure came from? Did it come from just overtime and paying and all
The
that?
23 million, is that what your question is? You know, I don't know. I assume that someone within New York State hierarchy did the math. I was asked that question about 8 days in, you know, if I was aware, you know, at a news conference, if I was aware of how much it was costing on a daily basis and what my position on that was. And frankly, then, as I would say now, I really didn't care how much it cost on a daily basis. And it's not as cavalier and as knuckleheaded as it sounds. I was concerned about the safety of the public, the safety of the team that we had in the woods searching, and the fact that we had to do everything we could do to apprehend them. So my concern as the leader of the law enforcement pursuit part wasn't monetary. Now that they've been captured, the number 23 million comes up. I've heard that during the escape itself, as you folks probably have, about $1 million a day. And I think that's a number derived from what the salaries are, what the damage was done, what the overtime is, and not just for those of us on the panel and our folks, but also all of the other agencies that would have been involved in that. That's nothing to sneeze at, and that's why some of the, the fact that some people can get out of prison as soon as they can get out of prison kind of sticks in my craw a bit, because they did a lot of damage for the state of New York, and not just monetarily, but for careers and professionals and people who, are doing their level best every day.
Yeah, we've heard the money brought up quite a few times, and I'll tell you something like we discussed every morning with our CERT teams before we went out. The most important thing to us wasn't money, wasn't anything else, is that no one in the general public got hurt. That was the most important thing to us. Didn't matter about anything else.
And I'm going to take the liberty of doing a quick follow-up to what Mike just said. I heard a lot of people say, boy, those COs made a lot of money. I've talked to a lot of them. I consider them all friends. They'd have given up that money to have never had to go through that experience. Yeah. And the state comptroller's office was very involved in putting together the amount of the $23 million. I think it was a guesstimate, but a pretty close one. They were pretty comfortable with it.
I have two questions. The first one would be when it came down to the Red Book. Was that followed step by step? Because
the Red Book is generally, think of the Red Book like a base plan that you look at, but it's like playing a football game. You start out with your base plan, but you quickly have to change depending on what the defense is doing against you. So you kind of do the same thing with an escape plan. You begin, and as the major alluded to, as more evidence comes in, it's designed to be shifted and moved. It's fluid, is the way to think of it. Okay. You design and move it as you have to. The biggest thing with an escape plan, and this is the illusion that's put out there, people think the escape plan is put in to actually catch the inmates. It's designed to keep them on the ground and keep them in the area to give us the chance to catch them. That's really what it's for.
Okay, because I was going to go right next to the siren at the powerhouse. How come that was they never called them to blow it?
I don't know.
It's there, you hear it every day, but that one slipped through the cracks. That would have put everybody in the village up at 5:30 whenever they noticed it. So that one kind of slipped right past.
To steal a line from someone in Congress, it's not in my purview. I'm not quite sure whose responsibility it is to blow that horn.
Yeah, so I just didn't know if that was a line item in the red book or if that's not even in there at all. And
It is in the red book.
it is. Okay, well, I guess they just missed it. And my other question was, up there in the areas of doing patrol up toward Owl's Head, were you short on manpower to the point where you could only put one person in a patrol car? Or how did that happen?
No, sir. Generally, there was always 2 persons per patrol car. They broke us up into squads, but I was a sergeant at the time, and many of the days during a manhunt, I did have a partner with me. That particular day, I did not.
Okay. Well, of all days not to have one. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
I just want to know what's changed. Since this escape happened, what's changed in the department? I mean, the superintendent still has to request permission to lock down the facility, correct?
Yes.
So what's changed from the escape? For the good. Not I mean, obviously, there's a lot that's changed.
We have clear lunch pails.
I mean, tablets? Yeah. I meant positive change, okay? All right, just thought I'd ask. So there's nothing. Nothing's changed for the better.
I would say that the mindset of the staff is different. You know, a lot of people at Clinton, and like I said, Chris can tell you the same thing. We worked there for many years, and it was always one of our things we carried on our chest saying, it's never happened here. You can't say that now, so the mindset is different now inside the jail. You know, I think people look at it differently. And hopefully that's a good thing. You know, it's sad that it happened, yes, but sometimes you need to take a pop in the nose to realize you're doing something wrong and have to look at it and say, I probably should change the way I'm doing this.
Yeah, but the bad thing for Clinton now is right out of the academy now. You know how long it took to get there originally. It used to be a wait. Now it's immediately. So you have no experience when you get there now, whatsoever.
Well, unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. You know, when I started and Chris started, it was the same way in corrections. A lot of young staff were injected into the system. But then there was a slow time of hiring in the department because the system had basically hit where it was and it wasn't expanding anymore. But now you hit that big time where people were hired and they're now retiring. And that's what you're hitting now, the mass retirement time of all those people that were hired at the same time. You know, and I'm sure the state police suffer the same thing. You know, it's kind of the nature of the beast. When you work in these large agencies, you have hiring in lumps, and they retire in lumps, unfortunately.
Okay.
A couple questions. We were told that the manhole cover was supposed to have been bolted down, and it wasn't. So what's the story behind that?
Well, the manhole cover was chained. There's a series of rungs that go down in the invert that goes down in the manhole, and that was cut. I don't know if they ever determined how that was done, but we pried that manhole cover off during the search, and we found that there wasn't there a bunch of fingernail clipper things like had been pried up priorly, but I don't really know how that got something. It was chained.
But they never got that question answered though, right? As to why it was unchained?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I do know it was chained though.
The other storyline was that the scuffle that took place, that at least the story out here was the inmates did that on purpose to give an indication to the prison guards that something was going on, that scuffle kind of ended pretty quickly. And then of course New York State did not allow the lockdown. Is that your thoughts on that too? That was the prisoners trying to give the guards indication something was going on?
No, actually, I was there that night for that big fight. One of my roles of my job is I was called in whenever chemical weapons were deployed, so I was there that evening. No, that was a real fight. It was two gang factions going at each other. You know, it's just coincidental that it happened. You know, is it unfortunate they didn't lock down the facility? Yes.
Okay.
But on the facility level, that's beyond our call, unfortunately.
Okay. And I just want to go down the line to Assemblywoman Janet Dupree. Thank you for going to the press and defending the men and women that work at the correctional facility. So thank you for that. To you two gentlemen who were there, lived this, thank you for your service and for protecting us. And Tammy, I know in the show you had made a comment that not everybody can work in there, and I agree with that. It takes special people to do that. But we all, even though we don't work there, we know people that work there, we have family that work there, so we're all affected by it. To major guests, you were phenomenal through this whole thing. When we were watching you on TV, the professionalism was second to none. And I remember thinking, yeah, this is North Country, this is how we do it. To the producer, I'm sorry I don't know your name, but thank you. There's been 3 shows on this, but thank you for giving us the real one. And, you know, and when I'm watching this, what you shared with us is what we were all thinking. It's not the men and women in blue. The issue was up in Albany. If they would allow our people to do their job, this never would have happened. So thank you for bringing that to light, because we were all thinking it. And to Sergeant Cook, I remember when hearing the story, if I'm not mistaken, I think you also are the one that trains the officers or the state police shooting instructor.
Yeah, I was a firearms instructor.
And when that happened, I'm thinking, this was not Sweat's lucky day to have you. I want to piggyback on that. When we heard Matt got killed, it was an elite squad from the Border Patrol. I think they came in from Texas. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then I thought it was fitting that one of our own North Countrymen, you, Sergeant Cook, took down Sweat. So thank you for that.
We're closing in on 9 o'clock. Which seems like this has gone pretty quickly. If somebody has one more question, we'll take it before we, yes.
What can we as citizens do to try to make it different so that we don't have people who are facing dangers every day, risking their lives and not being treated fairly, and a system that isn't working in the best interests of everyone, the inmates, the guards, and our citizens? What 3 things can we do as individuals?
I can tell you, because I teach Clinton County pistol permit class for the county here since Judge Favreau came in. And one of the things I always stress to people about law enforcement is the best thing you can do, folks out there, is support the men and women in law enforcement. They do a job that isn't understood by most people. They don't know the rules. They get caught clips on the news showing only 5 seconds of what took 30 seconds that actually happened. And it's usually the worst 5 seconds that they can put on there to put them in the worst light. You know, and it's a tough job, and it's a demanding job. You know, state police, corrections, border patrol, customs, it doesn't matter. You know, they do the best they can every day. They're a human being. Are they perfect? Can they make mistakes? Yes. But they always err on the side to try and do what's right. Because like I said, every morning, and I know the state police did the same thing, it's not today. No one's going to get hurt today. We're going to find them, and we're going to do our best to get them. That was our mindset. If one of us got hurt in the price for doing it, we accepted that every day. There wasn't a thought in our mind. If I had to step in front to stop something, I'd have done it without a second thought in my mind.
But what can we do to try to change it? Should we be writing to our legislators?
Absolutely.
I mean, what
All your legislators,
concrete
write
things?
to them, because they do listen. They do listen. And a campaign of letters and phone calls will make a difference.
I want to add to that, and maybe this will be the final statement. It probably shouldn't be, but I'm going to say to you right now, having spent 41 years as an elected official, I have never been more frightened than I am right now with some of the things that are happening in New York State. And part of it being this bail reform and some of the other things that are happening. And yes, reach out to every single legislator you can, and the governor and anybody else you want to send an email or a letter to, and tell them they have to start remembering that these men and women are putting their lives on the line, and they have to start realizing they're the ones who need the protection more than the criminals. Thank you for listening. We are going to close it up. I thank you all for being here on this night, for your attention. I cannot enough thank this outstanding panel. What a great group of people that got selected, and thank each and every one of you for your comments and clearing up, I think, a lot of questions that people have had. Major Guest does have some of his books here, Relentless Pursuit. If anyone is interested, he will stay for a few minutes. And I think I got one of the first autographed copies. It's very special to me. If you haven't had it, it's a great book if you want to. We had offered to set him up earlier, and the major being the major, he said this is the correction officer's night, and he didn't want to do that, but we convinced him to bring a few if somebody's interested. My very final note, my very final plea to each of you, drive safely on your way home tonight. Weather could get bad. I understand it's getting a little icy out there. Please be careful, be safe. Thank you for coming.